Emily Rauscher. I'm a professor in sociology at Brown University, and my research is all about education and inequality. Right now, my work is looking especially at school spending, kindergarten through 12th grade school spending, and how school spending matters for child well being in terms of learning and educational attainment, but also in terms of well being. Have looked at the effects of school spending on child mortality, and I have some work looking at the effects of school spending on child health.
Wow. Okay. That's definitely some important work. I'm a substitute teacher myself, so I get to see what's going on sometimes inside the school. So I'm sure the parents and the students really appreciate that type of research. Now, I can ask you, when did you develop this passion for sociology, and what exactly is sociology in general?
That's a great question. My parents ask me that a lot. What is sociology? I developed an interest in sociology um, kind of without knowing what sociology is. I was working um, in a college admissions office, and I noticed a pattern. People applied from all over the world with many various backgrounds, but in general, students had a big advantage if they had more resources, especially financial resources, in terms of preparation for college, and that translated into a higher likelihood of being admitted. And um, that really made me wonder about this kind of system of education in the United States, and I had grown up thinking that it was very meritocratic. And all of this stuff that I was observing made me realize that the game is pretty kind of rigged, from the start based on how many or how much resources your family has to help you prepare. And I my own family didn't have much money, and I had just thought, oh, this is my shortcoming, it's my fault. But as I gained exposure in the world and saw these patterns, I realized that this is um, it's a systematic or structural inequality that individual children and families can't do much about. And so that made me interested in learning about how we could make education more equal. And I didn't know what field um, studied that topic, but I did some research and some searching and learned that sociology was a great or the ideal field to study that. And so I got very lucky and got admitted to a PhD program in sociology. And there I learned that sociology is um, it's the study of um, I guess there are many different ways of putting it, but it's the study of groups and organizations and the things that humans do when they come together. So it's not the study of individuals, it's the study of the society and the social world that we create together as humans. A lot of
Wow. Okay. That's very interesting. I appreciate you taking the time to break that down. Now I can ask you, doing this type of work and doing this type of research, do you get a lot of pushback? Maybe, you're speaking about structural inequalities, people may not understand or even how effective the spending can be, for the children and their education?
That's a good question. So there are inevitably different views on the topic, as you mentioned. Um, I think I try to focus on the good. So, what does school spending do for us? And I think that for a long time, um, the benefits of school spending were underestimated. And even now, most of the research on school spending looks at the effects on educational or economic outcomes. But if we only limit our focus to those benefits, then we miss lots of other important benefits for children, including in terms of well-being and health and lower mortality risk. And those, if we kind of miss or ignore those benefits, then we underestimate or under acknowledge all the benefits of school spending.
Okay. Now I would like to ask you this. I guess you have students, and maybe a lot of them are younger. They may be recently coming out of high school, just a few years removed. Um, what is their perspective, when they receive this information? Are they kind of divided, or are they more understanding of, what you're trying to do?
Yes, so the students that am lucky to work with, they um, are very receptive to this, and they will give examples in class about how school spending benefited them beyond, they will talk about in terms of learning and their educational benefits, but they also will talk about these broader benefits that they have observed also. Things that the students notice are often related to a building improvement or technology improvements. This is capital spending, so spending on a fixed cost rather than operation spending, which are teachers and staff and salaries and things like that. But so they are most likely to notice these capital or building improvements, but when encouraged or um, nudged to think about the benefits of having more teachers around, then they'll start to recognize those benefits as well.
The work that you do, the research and working with the students, are you primarily in a traditional classroom setting, or are you outside the classroom? And what courses in particular are you involved in?
Yeah, so I teach in a classroom setting, a traditional classroom setting, and I have taught several classes. I teach introductory statistics. This coming semester, I'm teaching a graduate level statistics course. And then in terms of substantive topics, I teach sociology of education. I teach both undergraduate and graduate sociology of education. I teach a class on inequality of infant health. I've taught, a class on inequality or stratification, and then I've also taught a class on demography or population studies. So um, thinking about the either the population of the whole world, um, all humans, or populations of nations and how they grow and change, both in terms of um, births and deaths, but also health and education.
Wow. Okay. That's very, very interesting. Now I can ask you about this. I was reading your profile, and they said that you're the chair elect of the American Sociological Association. What exactly is that, and what is your role?
Oh, I am the chair elect of the Sociology of Education section, of the ASA, of the American Sociological Association. So in that role, it's helping to lead a section of the ASA on sociology of education. And the role is to um, help this section move forward and advance our thinking and promote success for junior scholars and think about how we want to move the discipline forward.
Okay, okay. Now, all of that is very interesting. Have you thought about maybe writing books or even doing documentaries, based on your research?
That's a great question. I most all of my work really has been writing academic peer-reviewed journals. I've done several kind of media interviews, kind of like this, but I've never done a documentary, and I also have not written a book. And I think that's one thing that I'd like to challenge myself to do in the future. I am working on a project about school supporting nonprofits. So these are things like parent teacher associations, parent teacher organizations, booster clubs. These are local nonprofit organizations that raise money for the local schools or school district. And that project, I think, would be really interesting to be able to expand beyond just an article length and hopefully write a book about that.
Okay, okay, definitely. I would look forward to that. Getting funding, are people, I guess, like, well, have the money, but they want to know why is it important to use it, or is it more so like we just don't have the money to do the things that we would like to have done?
Yeah, so that project that's trying to identify all of the local school supporting nonprofits in the US, and these are parent teacher associations, booster clubs, any education foundations, any nonprofit that's registered with the IRS that raises money for the local schools or district. And it that as part of that project, I'm going to work to see what those funds buy for the local school district, both directly, but also um, to see if they free up funds that the district can use for other things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to buy. And this is these nonprofit funds, they don't show up in school district budgets. So this is another way that we've been underappreciating the effects or the benefits of school spending. So because we don't have uh, data on this money from school supporting nonprofits, it doesn't appear in most research on school spending. So it's trying to see how much of these nonprofit funds there are, what they buy for the schools and districts, and how unequally they're distributed across districts in the US.
Okay, okay. Now I wanted to ask you this. Um, Over the years you've been doing this type of work, do you feel like have things gotten better, or are things about the same, or are they getting worse in terms of, like you say, equal achievement, improved occupational opportunities, and just K through 12, just dealing with the overall well-being of the students?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, and when you look long term, it's a really positive story because um, almost all states have had a school finance reform, it's called, where some policy change happened, or often it happened multiple times, where the state legislature changed how state funding for education is distributed. And most states distribute school spending what's called progressively. So they allocate more funds to school districts that have higher poverty or lower income, higher needs, basically at the school district level. And so that has happened gradually over time from about the 1970s through recent years. So that has been a very positive development, and that has made school spending much more equitable with, substantial benefits for students in poverty, and especially for high poverty school districts. That has helped with the equity in terms of student learning. It unfortunately hasn't by any means solved the problem. Districts and schools with high poverty have a lot of needs beyond just the school or the classroom. And so the kind of next challenge, or the current challenge, is trying to help close the gap outside of school. So, big differences in terms of family resources and what children have the opportunity to learn outside of school.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that because I think a lot of times people take it for granted. I mean, you have the issues in school, of course, but there's so many factors and things that children go through outside of school that bring into school that affects their ability to, thrive in a school setting, let alone if the school
Exactly.
is not financially, adequate. Let's see.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about this. I guess you did some research on the effects of COVID and school closings. If you could
Mhm.
just talk about the work that you did, and how do you feel about it now going into 2025? Have the schools and the students fully recovered, or a work in progress?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that project with a graduate student, we found that um, in areas where the school districts were closed, that slowed or reduced the number of deaths from COVID-19. So that was a positive thing. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, because in other work that I'm doing, um, we have found that, when schools closed, children were at home or not in the school environment. And so they were exposed to more high risk environments. And child mortality went up about 20% during the COVID school closure period. And that was not driven by deaths from COVID-19. It was because they were outside of the relatively safe school environment, and so they were exposed to these other risks of injury, including falling and firearm deaths, and things that they are not exposed to in school. So it seems that school closures help to reduce mortality among adults, but for kids, it had this kind of counterintuitive effect because of the unequal environments that kids are exposed to outside of school.
Okay. Now I can ask you in general, how much time to do research on these different projects, like something you do in a semester or over a period of years, or does it kind of vary in between?
Yeah, that's a great question. It always takes longer than I think. I always think, oh, this project will be super straightforward. It will only take a little bit. And then inevitably, there are big challenges that you run into, and you have to make difficult decisions about measurement and analysis. So it always takes a lot longer than I expect. I would say most of the research is done during breaks during the academic year. So, for example, we're coming up on winter break, and that's a key working period for researchers. So, I'm going to be, while everyone is enjoying their holiday break, I'm going to be working away trying to complete some more analysis and writing.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. You taking out the time, to do this type of work is really, really important, and it definitely has an effect on the future. I was checking out your profile, and it talked about your related work examines which types of reforms most effectively increase the quality of infant health, prenatal care, and educational outcomes. You kind of spoke to it a little bit. Prenatal care, like how do you find out? Do you have to interview people, or do you just have like statistics? Or it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, with several graduate students, I've done research projects looking at infant health, and these data come from administrative data on birth certificates. So, information about birth weight and um, gestational length, so how long the mother was pregnant with the child. And we've done several studies using those high quality birth certificate data, looking at the effects of wildfires on infant health. And so that was one project. And we've also looked at the effects of changing, um, let's see, making Medicaid eligibility simpler. So states took several steps to make it easier for pregnant women to access healthcare through Medicaid. This was in the 1980s. And in both cases, so we found that making it simpler to access care through Medicaid had really substantial benefits for infant health. And states varied in the approaches that they took, and kind of the easier that states made it for pregnant mothers to uh, enroll in Medicaid in order to get health care, the bigger benefits you see for infant health. And then in terms of wildfires, we found that if there was a wildfire in the county where the mother lived during pregnancy, this had negative effects on the health of the infant, and the effects were especially larger for mothers with low levels of education. And this is probably related to financial resources. So, for mothers with low levels of education, they are less likely to have a substantial amount of emergency funds that they could use to um, you know either leave the county or deal with any of the negative effects of the wildfires.